All right, thanks. I couldn't be more excited to be here today and joining in the conversation about defying the impossible. And to be honest, I've been working on my talk for about 20 years. You see, back in high school, I was that guy that played competitive sports. I was the vice president of my student council. I threw some of the biggest parties my high school had ever seen. I was in it for the good times. Academically, I lacked motivation. I actually failed grade 12 math twice. As far as my family and friends could see, university was not the path for me. I wasn't just told it would be hard, I was told it would be next to impossible for me to complete a degree. My guidance counselors urged me to go and get started with my career as soon as I graduated. Yet, here I am on a TED stage, that's pretty cool, advocating for continuous learning through higher education. And I have a degree completed, and I've started my own company that helps high school students with their own academic journey. But back in my senior year, hearing that university would be impossible had a profound impact on my life trajectory, all because I listened to the doubters and the naysayers. I still went ahead and applied to university, and I actually did receive an offer. But I did what any right-minded 18-year-old would do in that situation, and I moved to Australia with my best friend, Josh. Yeah. You see, I actually believe that university would be impossible. I believe that there was just no way I could succeed academically. So I packed my bags, and I moved as far away as I could to learn how to surf and be a flair bartender. As it turns out, that was the best thing I could do for myself. I learned exponentially more traveling around the world than I did in my last 2 years of high school. While I was down under, I pushed through my comfort zone. I tried new jobs like picking fruit and selling cell phones. I met incredibly intelligent, worldly people, but most importantly, I gained perspective. When I flew home, I arrived at Pearson Airport, and my dad was sitting there waiting with a Tim Hortons coffee, and he said, "You're going to see the world differently now." I had no idea what he was talking about. So I went ahead, applied to university, started in the fall, and I ended up graduating with an average above 80%. After I graduated, I took a master's prerequisite stats course because I could see the importance and applications to my career, but I was intimidated. I didn't have a good track record with math. I actually got over 95% on my final exam. Talk about defying the impossible. Thanks. Thanks. I was so proud of that moment. I took that exam and hung it up on my mom's fridge at almost 30 years old because I didn't have the chance to do that in high school. You see, how we learn is individualized. Our paths are personalized. But how education is delivered to students is ubiquitously standardized. The system is created for efficiencies, but as a result, some individuals fall through the cracks. Pursuing an education should not feel impossible for anyone. And what needs to change is exactly what my dad was talking about back at Pearson. What we need to change is our perspective. In many ways, defying the impossible requires that we define the impossible. And in my experience, it's all too often that other people, rather than ourselves, that get the opportunity to do the defining. When we allow this to happen, we're blindly following perspective, which isn't always factual, and in some cases is chalked with bias and opinion. Now, I'm sure that most of you are having a very different experience with your high school math. But I'm also sure that most of you in high school have someone telling you what you should and you shouldn't do with your education. This advice is coming from a good place. Your loved ones, they only want to see you succeed. They want to see you get a meaningful career. But in my line of work, what I end up seeing happening is students are driven to a couple of degree paths, in particular engineering, business, and medical sciences, and not enough consideration is given to interests, strengths, or context. Now, I would never tell you to not pursue one of those degrees, but what is critical at this point in time is that you listen to those interests and strengths. It's when students are prescribed away from their individual attributes that they start to run into trouble. That's where we're seeing students arrive at university who have never faced an academic challenge before. We're seeing staggering rates of mental health cases from coast to coast. Students are suffering from anxiety and silence because they fear disappointment. And in some cases, students are abandoning education altogether. Now, we're passing advice on with the intent to help, but it's often rooted in our own personal experiences that can be 10, 20, and sometimes even 30 years removed from the academic landscape of today. And what this does is it forces our students to focus on a couple of pathways through education to get to success. One of the ways that we measure success is looking at graduation rates. And in Canada, we're doing a pretty good job. Many students are flourishing academically. Others arrive and they find their way. In fact, about 50% of students change their path before they graduate. But graduation is only one critical metric. Often, the more important metric is acquiring that meaningful career. But unfortunately, when you graduate, you can't cash your degree in for a job. Now, the current narrative in the media is perpetuating. Oh, I'm a little behind here. I apologize. Let me catch up. There we go. The current narrative in the media is perpetuating this perspective of unemployment woes. You don't have to look too far to find a headline that will cast shadows of doubt and fear amongst students and parents alike. Again, what this does is it forces us to focus on a couple of degree choices. But what's worse is that it adds an element of scarcity to our academic choices. There's a really interesting study conducted on scarcity by Dr. Shafir and Dr. Mullin-Nathan. In this study, they take a look at behavioral economic principles and ask questions like, what happens to our mind when we have too little? Or how does the context of scarcity shape our choices and influence our behavior? I found the results in this book absolutely fascinating, and I found a lot of similarities when I'm working with students. You see, when we add an element of scarcity to anything, be it money, be it time, be it sleep, it orients our behavior on the task at hand, but it comes at a greater cost. For example, when you're hungry, you're going to focus on food naturally, but it can come at the cost of concentration, a completely natural response. I mean, my 3-year-old daughter has the meanest hangry streak. She gets locked in on drink yogurts, and it's trouble. We have to keep the fridge stocked just to keep the peace. In Dr. Shafir's talk, he does a really good job at illustrating this point, and I'm going to borrow his example to help with my point. So imagine it's January and you're about to travel to Florida. It's the day before, and you're packing with your best friend. Your best friend has one of those obnoxiously large suitcases, so they're just throwing everything in there. Beside it is your suitcase, and it's much smaller. So you need to make some choices. You need to try to figure out, what's the weather going to be like in Florida? Well, this is me at Disney last year in January, and we do have one of those obnoxiously large suitcases. But after my wife was done packing for herself and the kids, I was left with about that much space. And what I quickly learned about scarcity in the suitcase is that shirts at Disney are really expensive when you need to keep warm. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Monsters University, but that was a heavy cost. My point here is that scarcity allows us to focus on the task at hand. When you're hungry, it will get you that drink yogurt, but it can come at the cost of dad's feelings. When you have an exam, it will allow you to cram for that exam, but it can come at the cost of sleep. Now, if we extrapolate this study out into the context of students going into university, it can have some detrimental impacts on both our physical and mental well-being. What it does, again, is it focuses our attention on a couple of degrees, but it can come at the cost of us being able to chase our dreams. It can come at the cost of us being able to find our passion. In society right now, we're too fixated on credentials. 65% of the jobs do require a degree. Ironically, it's suggested that about 65% of the jobs that will be available to the students here don't exist yet. According to the Department of Employment in Canada, 20% of those jobs do require a specific credential. So if you want to be an accountant, yes, you need your CPA. You want to be a doctor, nurse, or a teacher, you have credentials that you need to get. But it's about 80% of the jobs out there, they do not require a specific degree. Yes, they're looking for a skill set, but they're also looking for talent, and they're looking for the right fit. This is something that my partner Devin and I spend a lot of time talking about as we're helping students make that big decision. Often our clients come to us and they're very fixated on the one variable, and that being academics, but they're not considering all of their options. Devin and I like to think that we're design thinkers, which means we're more fixated on the problem than the solution. What that does is it pushes us to continue asking questions so that when we do arrive at a solution, we're more confident about it. Design thinkers have two critical tools in their kit. One is they keep asking questions. The other one is the Trifecta of Variables that was invented by IDEO here in the background. The Trifecta of Variables come down to three things, obviously, which is desirability, viability, and feasibility. Meaning, do I actually want this? Can I actually do it? And does it actually make financial sense? So let me give you a couple of examples. Back when I was working at the business school, I had a lot of students come to me and say, hey, I want to get into finance, iBanking. I want to be the next Wolf on Wall Street. I say, okay, why do you want to do that? Oh, well, I want to be successful. All right, what does successful mean to you? And they'd say, well, I want to have enough money so I can buy the things that I want in life. So this is a decision made based off of feasibility, or the mighty dollar sign. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's one variable. I'd also have students come to me and say, well, I was told that I should do engineering. I say, okay, well, why were you told that? Well, I'm really good at calculus and physics. Okay, well, what type of engineering do you want to do? I don't know. That's okay. That's fine at this stage, but they're making their decision based off of viability. They're capable of doing physics and calculus, so they'll succeed in engineering. Desirability, this is a tricky one, and this can get people into trouble. So I'll use a personal example. I love baseball. I've played a lot of baseball, and I still do. But the chances of me getting paid to play right now are not likely. However, I've developed a set of skills that I could work in a head office in a marketing capacity or operations capacity. And from what I understand, the Blue Jays pay pretty well. And maybe if I'm lucky, they'll watch this TED Talk and be like, hey, we need that guy in our head office. Or maybe not. But my point here is that we need to consider all of the variables, especially in education, because this will eliminate the scarcity of choice. In here, as my marker fails on me, this is where you'll find success. In the sweet spot there, that is where you'll find a meaningful career. The CBC just conducted a survey that showed that 47% of millennials would forgo a raise to find a meaningful career. You can't make all your choices based off of the dollar sign. The Gallup poll that I just looked at not too long ago suggested that 55% of young adults are not engaged in their work. Just because you're capable of doing it doesn't mean that you have to do it. And the next time someone tells you to follow your passion, if you don't understand what it is, understand that that is okay. What I recommend to you is that you plot out your strengths and your interests. Then aggregate your own personal data to predict your pathway to success and take control of your impossible in education. Because you see, once you get to your career, education can only take you so far. Academia does a really good job at teaching you the answers to questions that have already been asked. It's a really good job at teaching you how to do the research to find those answers. But as we look towards the future, we are going to need to find answers to questions that haven't been asked, questions that haven't even been thought of. And as we go seeking those answers, we will have empty searches. We will make mistakes, and we will fail a lot. But it's important that we don't let failure define our impossible. It's important that through every failure, we develop grit. In your career, you will face adversity. You will face challenges. You'll just flat out work with people you don't like. It's this grit that will carry you through. Now, as I've mentioned, I started my own company not too long ago. And the plight of an entrepreneur provides a lot of opportunity to develop this grit. It's a steep learning curve. And in fact, as an entrepreneur, I don't even really think you can call it a curve. It's more like a roller coaster. But at every peak, you achieve overwhelming success. And in every valley, you fall. But you get back up and you grow. For me, I started to realize that I was interested in entrepreneurship in the last couple of years. And I combined that with my passion for wanting to help students not make the same mistakes that I did. From there, I went and found a partner that would complement my skill set. So once I found someone that was smart, we made a go of it. But the thing is, entrepreneurship could be the poster child of impossible. According to Neil Patel from Forbes, 9 out of 10 startups fail. With a 10% success rate, you'd wonder why anybody would want to make a go of it. Yet, we're seeing pockets of innovators and entrepreneurs all around the world taking control of their impossible. And it's because of this that I actually believe we're witnessing a transformation of the term itself. What once represented constraint, restriction, or something that just simply couldn't be, is now representing the target or the goal for these innovators and entrepreneurs. I mean, right now we're witnessing a brand new space race with a private enterprise that believes they can fly us to Mars in as little as 70 days. NASA is developing technology so they can go give the sun a little poke and do some experimentation. Yet, it was suggested not that long ago that William Thomson Kelvin, the inventor of the Kelvin scale, said that heavier than air flying machines were impossible. Yet here we are. In Ontario, we're debating high-speed rail and rapid bus lanes, technology that's almost 70 years old, when we're within a 10-year reach of the proliferation of autonomous vehicles and hyperloops. In healthcare, we're about to make some major breakthroughs with 3D biosynthetic printing and nanotechnology. A couple years ago, I was flying home from Calgary beside a veterinarian researcher from the University of Calgary, and he was telling me that they have a rooster there that lost both of its talons to frostbite. So they printed out some new talons for that rooster, and it's living its best life. You see, I'm a futurist, so I love looking at accomplishments. But it's important that we pay attention to the failures. It's by overcoming the failures that we'll take the steps to defy the impossible. And as society, we need to learn how to better harness our failures. As humans, we're biologically wired to reward failure. When you go and work out, you're actually initiating trauma to promote growth. In short-term recovery, our cells multiply and then fuse together to create new muscle protein strands, which means you get swole. For the entrepreneurs out there, it's when you fail that you use short-term recovery driven by grit. There's a really incredible book called Grit, written by Angela Duckworth, and she defines grit as the combination of passion and perseverance over time. She goes so far to say that grit is a better indicator of success than social intelligence, good looks, and IQ, and I 100% agree with her. I not only think that this is where education is going wrong, but it's also perpetuating the problem. You see, the system is built off of passing and failing. When you pass, you move on, and you're deemed successful. But when you fail, you're left behind, and you endure an element of shame. Now, the brain is not anatomically a muscle, but in the intellectual process of learning, it's those who fail that grow. What this comes down to is that impossible has many ways to manifest. And we experience these emotional setbacks at school, in our careers, and in life. It's completely understandable if you feel the struggle when you don't understand something. It's completely normal if you feel disappointed when you don't get the grades you want or the job that you want. But don't fear failure. Failure is nothing more than the imposter of impossible, and it supplants uncertainty and doubt as it goes unchecked. Rather, I recommend to you that you embrace failure for motivation, for inspiration, and through self-reflection, you can achieve your own personal optimization. It's every experience that we have with failure, people, and their perspective that will take you closer to taking control of your impossible. Thank you.